My name is Chelsea Howard, and I am 32 years old. I built a beautiful life in Boston as a pediatric physical therapist helping children walk again when everyone else had given up. My parents never saw that, though. I was always invisible to them even when I was right there. But nothing prepared me for that Sunday afternoon when I stopped by their house with a gift for my niece. There on the dining room table sat a family tree project. Every name, every face was there, except mine. I had been erased completely as if I never existed. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from and subscribe to hear how I made them regret throwing me away like yesterday's garbage. I grew up in a quaint suburban neighborhood in Philadelphia with perfectly manicured lawns and white picket fences. From the outside, the Howard family looked picture perfect. My father Thomas was a respected accountant at a prestigious firm, and my mother Margaret was a kindergarten teacher beloved by all her students. Then there was my sister Amanda, 4 years older than me, and the undisputed star of our household. From my earliest memories, I could feel the difference in how my parents treated us. When Amanda brought home a B on her report card, there would be celebratory ice cream. When I brought home straight A's, I got a quick pat on the head and questions about why I wasn't more social like my sister. "Chelsea, why do you always have your nose in those books?" my mother would ask, shaking her head. "Look at Amanda. She has so many friends and everyone loves her." I was 8 when I overheard my father talking to his brother on the phone. "Amanda is just like Margaret, a real social butterfly. Chelsea is so quiet sometimes, I forget she is even in the house." Those words stung, but instead of pulling back, I doubled down on trying to earn their approval. I joined the debate team and won regional championships. I played the piano and performed at recitals. I graduated as valedictorian. But nothing seemed to capture their attention the way Amanda did by simply existing. When Amanda got engaged to Ryan Williams at 24, my parents nearly lost their minds with excitement. Ryan came from money old Philadelphia money, and my parents suddenly spent every waking moment planning what they called the wedding of the century. "Chelsea, you will be a bridesmaid, of course," my mother informed me, not asked me. "But honey, maybe try to lose 10 pounds before the big day. Amanda wants everything to be perfect." I spent 6 months hearing about nothing but wedding details. I flew home from college multiple times for dress fittings, menu tastings, and engagement parties where I stood in corners watching my parents orbit Amanda like she was the sun in their universe. The final blow came at my college graduation dinner. I had just received my bachelor's degree in health sciences with highest honors, a full scholarship to Boston University for my graduate studies, and an award for community service that only one student received each year. My parents had reluctantly made the trip, complaining about the hotel accommodations and how long the ceremony was. As we sat at the restaurant, I had carefully selected, hoping to finally have a moment to celebrate my achievement. Amanda cleared her throat. "I have an announcement," she said, her eyes gleaming. "Ryan and I are pregnant." The table erupted. My mother burst into tears of joy. My father ordered champagne for everyone except me since I would be driving. For the next 2 hours, all conversations centered around nursery colors and potential names. Not once did anyone mention my graduation or my upcoming move to Boston. That night in my dorm room, as I packed my belongings to start my new life, I made a decision. I would stop competing for a place in my family. Boston would be my fresh start, a place where I could be valued for who I was, rather than constantly measured against my sister. "Congratulations on your pregnancy, Amanda," I had said politely before leaving the restaurant. What I didn't say was that I was pregnant too, with possibility, with a future I would build myself far away from their shadow. Boston welcomed me like the family I never really had. The city's brick buildings and winding streets became my sanctuary as I threw myself into graduate school and building a life that was entirely my own. I found a small but charming apartment in Brookline, close enough to the hospital where I would eventually work, but far enough from campus to give me some separation between school and home. It was on the 3rd floor of a converted brownstone, with a bay window where I set up a reading nook and a tiny balcony where I grew herbs in the summer. Graduate school was intense, but I thrived in the demanding environment. My professors noticed my dedication and analytical mind. For the first time, I was being seen for my abilities, rather than compared to someone else. Chelsea, your understanding of neurological development in trauma patients is exceptional, Dr. Lieberman told me after I presented my research project. Have you considered specializing in pediatric rehabilitation? Those words of acknowledgement were like water to parched soil. I soaked them up and bloomed. It was during my second year of graduate school that I met Zara at a coffee shop near campus. She spilled her latte on my research papers, apologized profusely, and insisted on buying me dinner to make up for it. By dessert, we were laughing like old friends. Zara was studying architecture and had a way of seeing beauty in broken things that resonated deeply with me. A few months later, I met James at a hospital volunteer program. He was a medical student with a dry sense of humor who became the brother I never had. With Zara and James, I learned what genuine friendship felt like, the kind where you are appreciated for exactly who you are. Meanwhile, my family interactions grew increasingly strained. I would call home once a week out of obligation, but the conversations were always the same. Amanda is having such a hard time with morning sickness, my mother would say without asking about my studies. Ryan just got promoted. They are looking at houses in Rittenhouse Square. My father would announce, never inquiring about my own achievements. When Lily was born, I flew home for the weekend bringing a carefully selected gift, a silver baby bracelet engraved with her name and birth date. My mother barely glanced at it before putting it aside. Amanda got her a beautiful christening gown from that boutique on Fifth Avenue, she told me. Cost a fortune, but nothing is too good for our first grandchild. 3 years later, when Noah was born, the pattern repeated. I was an afterthought, expected to show up and admire my sister's perfect life and perfect children, while my own accomplishments went unnoticed. By then, I had completed my doctorate and secured a position at Boston Children's Hospital as a pediatric physical therapist specializing in trauma recovery. I had also met Michael, a pediatric surgeon with gentle hands and a quiet strength that made me feel safe. We met when consulting on a case together, a 7-year-old boy who had been in a terrible car accident. I was determined to help him walk again, and Michael respected my expertise in a way my family never had. You see possibilities where others see limitations, he told me one night as we walked along the Charles River. It is a gift, Chelsea. For my 30th birthday, Michael organized a surprise party with Zara, James, and other friends I had made in Boston. They decorated my apartment with photos of all of us together over the years, a visual reminder of the life I had built. My parents sent a generic birthday card with a $50 check. Amanda sent nothing. That night, surrounded by people who truly saw me, I made another decision. I would reduce contact with my family to the bare minimum required to maintain a relationship with my niece and nephew, who were innocent in all of this. I would send gifts on birthdays and holidays. I would make obligatory calls on major holidays. But I would stop expecting anything in return. You are enough, Michael whispered as we swayed to music in my living room after everyone had left. Your family may never see that, but everyone in this room tonight does. I believed him mostly. But there was still a small part of me, a wounded child inside, who hoped that someday my parents would see me too. It was Lily's 8th birthday when everything changed. I had ordered a custom dollhouse that replicated famous architectural landmarks, knowing my niece had recently declared she wanted to be an architect when she grew up. I decided to deliver it in person, since I had a conference in Philadelphia that weekend anyway. I called ahead to let my parents know I would be stopping by, but when I pulled into their driveway on Sunday afternoon, no one answered the door. I waited for 15 minutes, then used the spare key they kept under a flower pot to let myself in, planning to leave the gift and a card. The house was quiet, but there were signs of recent activity. Craft supplies covered the dining room table, glue sticks and colored pencils, and sheets of construction paper scattered across the surface. A pot of coffee was still warm in the kitchen. I placed Lily's gift on the hallway bench and was about to leave when I noticed it prominently displayed on an easel in the living room. A large poster board with a beautifully illustrated family tree. My father's name connected to my mother's at the top, a solid line dropping down to Amanda connecting to Ryan, despite their divorce, then branching further to Lily and Noah. I stepped closer, confusion washing over me. There was no branch for me. No photo, no name, nothing to indicate that Thomas and Margaret Howard had a second daughter. I circled the display, thinking perhaps I was missing something, that my branch must be on another side or panel. But there was nothing. Just an empty space where my connection should have been, with the faint ghost of pencil lines that had been erased, barely visible if you weren't looking for them. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. The physical pain was instant and overwhelming. I sank onto the sofa, staring at this visual representation of what I had always felt, what I had always tried to deny. I did not exist to them. I was an erasure, a mistake corrected with the stroke of a pencil. As I sat there, memories crashed over me like waves. The time my parents forgot to pick me up from piano recital, and I waited 2 hours in the rain. The 8th grade graduation they missed because Amanda had a minor cold. The empty seats at my high school valedictorian speech. All those moments I had rationalized away, made excuses for, suddenly crystallized into this undeniable truth displayed before me. I was still sitting there when I heard the front door open, followed by the chaos of multiple people entering the house. Lily's voice carried first, excited and breathless. "Grandma, can we put my project in my classroom tomorrow? Mrs. Peterson said family trees get extra credit if they are really creative." Then my mother's voice. "Of course, sweetheart. Your grandfather and I worked very hard to make it special." They all froze when they entered the living room and saw me sitting there. My mother recovered first. "Chelsea, what a surprise. We were just at the park with the children." I stood up slowly, my eyes never leaving the family tree. "I brought Lily a birthday gift," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Aunt Chelsea." Lily ran over and hugged me around the waist. "Did you see my school project Grandma and Grandpa helped me make, a family tree?" "I see it," I said quietly. "It is very beautiful." Amanda shifted uncomfortably, adjusting Noah on her hip. "We've been working on it all weekend. Lily has a big presentation tomorrow." I looked directly at my parents. "I notice I'm not on it." An uncomfortable silence fell. My father cleared his throat. We ran out of space on that side." "There seems to be plenty of space," I observed, pointing to the blank area where my branch should have been. "We didn't have a recent photo of you," my mother offered weakly. "I sent you professional headshots from the hospital last Christmas," I reminded her. "And you have my graduation photos, and the picture from the charity gala last year." Amanda rolled her eyes. "It is not a big deal, Chelsea. It is just a school project." "If it is not a big deal, then why am I the only one missing?" I asked, my voice still calm, though my hands had begun to tremble. Lily looked up at me, her innocent eyes confused. "Aunt Chelsea, why aren't you on our family tree?" In that moment, looking into my niece's eyes, I felt a clarity I had never experienced before. She deserved better than to witness this. She deserved better than to inherit this family's pattern of exclusion and favoritism. "That is a good question, Lily," I said, kneeling down to her level. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Your birthday gift is on the bench in the hallway. I hope you like it." I stood up, grabbed my purse, and walked toward the door. "Chelsea, wait," my mother called. "You are overreacting. We can add you to the tree right now." I paused at the doorway, not turning around. "No need. You made the tree exactly the way you see our family. I would not want to force my way into the picture." As I walked to my car, I could hear my father calling after me, but I did not look back. I drove 6 blocks before the tears made it impossible to see. I pulled over onto a quiet side street and finally let go of the composure I had been clinging to. I do not know how long I sat there sobbing in my car on a suburban Philadelphia street. Long enough that the sky began to darken. Long enough that my phone rang repeatedly with calls from my parents that I ignored. Long enough that finally I called the one person I knew would understand. "Michael," I managed when he answered. "They erased me." I drove back to Boston the next morning. Michael had offered to come get me, but I needed those 6 hours alone in my car watching the familiar landscape of my childhood fade in the rearview mirror. Every mile marker felt like another step toward freedom. The breakdown in my car had been cathartic in a way I hadn't expected. After the initial wave of pain subsided, a strange calm settled over me. It was as if seeing such tangible proof of my invisibility in my family finally freed me from the hope that things would ever be different. When I arrived home, Michael was waiting with takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, and a quiet understanding that was worth more than any words. He held me that night as I cried one last time, not for the family I had lost, but for the little girl who had spent years trying so hard to be seen. "What do you want to do now?" he asked the next morning as we sat drinking coffee by my bay window. "I want to cut contact completely," I said without hesitation. "No more holiday calls, no more birthday gifts, no more pretending." And that is exactly what I did. I changed my phone number that day. I created a new email address and deleted the old one. I sent a brief factual email to my parents from the new address informing them that I would no longer be in contact and asking them to respect my decision. They didn't, of course. The first month was a barrage of messages through every possible channel. They showed up at my apartment once, but by then I had already moved in with Michael into a secure building with a doorman who had strict instructions not to allow them up. When they found my work email and began sending daily messages, I had my lawyer send a cease and desist letter. "This is harassment," I told the family therapist I had started seeing. Dr. Winters was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a directness I appreciated. They never wanted me in their lives until I removed myself. "People often don't value what they have until it's gone," she observed, "but that doesn't mean you need to make yourself available to them again. Boundaries are healthy." Amanda left several angry voicemails on Michael's phone before we changed his number too. "You are being selfish and childish," she spat in the last message. "Mom is crying every day because of you. Dad can't sleep. You are tearing this family apart because your feelings got hurt over a stupid school project. Grow up, Chelsea." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that wouldn't be twisted and used against me. Instead, I focused on building the life and family I deserved. Michael and I grew closer, our relationship deepening in the absence of the stress my family had always brought. We talked about a future together, about marriage and possibly children someday. My friendship with Zara and James strengthened as well. They became regular fixtures at our dinner table, bringing laughter and warmth into our home. Through them, our circle expanded to include others who shared our values and outlook on life. At the hospital, I threw myself into my work with renewed passion. The children I treated became even more important to me, especially those who, like me, felt unseen or unwanted. I started a community outreach program for underprivileged children with physical disabilities, creating a space where they could receive therapy even if their families couldn't afford it. "You are changing lives," my department head told me when the program received a grant for expansion. "These children will have opportunities they never would have had without your vision." Healing came in unexpected ways. In helping others find their strength, I discovered my own. In creating spaces where children felt valued, I began to truly understand that the lack had never been in me but in my parents' capacity to love beyond their narrow vision. A year after the family tree incident, Michael proposed during a weekend trip to Cape Cod. We were walking along the beach at sunset when he knelt in the sand and held out a ring. "You are the strongest person I know," he said, his eyes shining with emotion. "I want to build a life with you, Chelsea. A real family where everyone is seen and valued." I said yes, without hesitation. That night, as we celebrated with champagne in our beachfront cottage, I realized I hadn't thought about my parents or Amanda in weeks. The pain hadn't disappeared completely, but it had transformed into something manageable, a scar rather than an open wound. "I think I'm finally healing," I told Michael as we watched the waves crash against the shore. "I don't need them to see me anymore. I can see myself." 2 years passed in a blur of wedding planning, career advancements, and building our life together. Michael and I had purchased a small house in a quiet neighborhood with a garden I tended on weekends and an extra bedroom we planned to eventually turn into a nursery. We had decided on a small wedding, just 30 of our closest friends at a historic inn in Vermont. The date was set for October, when the fall foliage would be at its peak. Everything was falling into place exactly as we had planned it. Until the phone call. It was a Thursday evening in August. Michael was working late at the hospital, and I was reviewing patient files at our kitchen table when my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, thinking it was probably a telemarketer, but something made me pick up. "Hello? Chelsea." The voice was shaky, tear-filled. "It's Amanda." My hand tightened around the phone. "How did you get this number?" "Please don't hang up," she begged. "It's Dad. He had a heart attack this morning. It's bad, Chelsea. They don't know if he's going to make it." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Despite everything, despite the pain and rejection, this was still my father we were talking about. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Philadelphia General. They took him into surgery an hour ago." She paused, her breathing ragged. "He's been asking for you, Chelsea. Before they sedated him, he kept saying your name." I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself against the flood of conflicting emotions. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "Please, Chelsea, we need you." After we hung up, I sat motionless at the kitchen table until Michael came home. He found me still sitting there, staring at nothing. "What happened?" he asked, immediately sensing something was wrong. I told him about the call, about my father's heart attack, about Amanda's plea. "What do you want to do?" He asked the same question he had posed 2 years earlier when I returned from Philadelphia, broken. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to go. Another part is afraid it's just another opportunity for them to hurt me." Michael pulled his chair closer and took my hands in his. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. If you want to go, I'll go with you, or I'll hold down the fort here. If you want to stay, I'll support that too." I spent a sleepless night weighing my options. By morning, I had made my decision. "I need to go," I told Michael over coffee. "Not for them, but for myself. I need to know I didn't turn my back when it mattered, even if they did." 6 hours later, I walked through the doors of Philadelphia General Hospital, my heart pounding with anxiety. The receptionist directed me to the cardiac care unit on the 4th floor. As the elevator climbed, I rehearsed what I would say, how I would maintain my boundaries while still being present. The doors opened, and there was my mother sitting in a vinyl chair in the waiting area, looking 10 years older than when I had last seen her. She glanced up as I approached, disbelief washing over her face. "Chelsea," she whispered, standing unsteadily. "You came." I nodded, keeping a careful distance between us. "How is he?" "Stable for now." Her eyes filled with tears. "The doctor says he needs a quadruple bypass. Surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning." Amanda appeared from around the corner, a coffee cup in each hand. She stopped when she saw me, surprise evident in her expression. "You actually came," she said, an edge to her voice despite the circumstances. Before I could respond, a small figure barreled into me from behind, wrapping arms around my waist. Aunt Chelsea, Lily, now 10 years old, looked up at me with delight. "I knew you would come. I told everyone you would." Next to her stood Noah, 7 now, and shy, half hiding behind his mother. "Hi," he said softly, clearly not remembering me well. "Hello, Lily." "Hello, Noah," I said, momentarily disarmed by their presence. "It's good to see you both." A doctor approached, then clipboard in hand, saving me from having to navigate more immediate family interactions. He introduced himself as Dr. Garcia, the cardiologist overseeing my father's case. "Mr. Howard experienced a major cardiac event," he explained. 3 of his coronary arteries are severely blocked. We've stabilized him for now, but he needs bypass surgery as soon as possible." "What's his prognosis?" I asked, slipping into the clinical mindset that helped me maintain emotional distance. With successful surgery and lifestyle changes, he could make a full recovery. But I want to be clear, this is serious. The next 48 hours are critical." My mother began to sob quietly. Amanda put an arm around her shoulders, shooting me a look that seemed to blame me for asking direct questions. "Can I see him?" I asked the doctor. "Briefly. He's heavily sedated right now." I followed Dr. Garcia down the hallway to my father's room, acutely aware of my mother and Amanda watching me go. The steady beep of monitors greeted me as I entered the dimly lit room. My father lay still in the hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting him to various machines. He looked small, somehow diminished in a way I had never seen before. I stood beside his bed, unsure what to feel. This man had overlooked me, forgotten me, and ultimately erased me from the family narrative. Yet seeing him so vulnerable stirred something complicated inside me. As if sensing my presence, his eyelids fluttered open. Recognition dawned slowly in his cloudy eyes. "Chelsea," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You came." "Yes," I said simply. "I came." His hand moved slightly on the blanket, reaching toward me. After a moment's hesitation, I took it gently in mine. "I'm sorry," he murmured, before his eyes closed again, medication pulling him back under. Two simple words. Words I had waited decades to hear. Yet standing there holding my unconscious father's hand, I realized they weren't enough to erase years of pain. But they were a start, a crack in the wall I had built to protect myself. I stayed at the hospital overnight, sleeping fitfully in a recliner in the waiting room rather than going to my parents' house. My mother remained as well, while Amanda took the children home with promises to return in the morning. In the sterile quiet of the hospital night, watching my mother's exhausted form curled uncomfortably in a chair across from me, I realized something unexpected. I didn't need to forgive them to be present in this moment. I didn't need to forget to show compassion. I could hold my truth and still choose to be the person I wanted to be. My father's surgery was scheduled for 7 the next morning. I stepped out to find coffee for my mother and myself, returning to find Amanda had arrived with the children, who were now sitting quietly looking at books the hospital provided. "The surgeon just came by," my mother informed me, accepting the coffee with shaking hands. "He says the procedure will take at least 6 hours. I nodded, settling in for the long wait. An uncomfortable silence fell over our group, the only sounds the occasional announcement over the hospital PA system and the rustle of pages as Lily turned her book. After about an hour, my mother excused herself to use the restroom. As soon as she was out of earshot, Amanda turned to me. "Why are you really here?" she asked, her voice low but accusatory. "You disappeared for 2 years without a word, and now suddenly you care." I took a measured breath before responding. "I'm here because regardless of our past, he's still my father. I would never forgive myself if I didn't come." She scoffed. "So this is about making yourself feel better, typical." "I didn't come to fight with you, Amanda," I said calmly. "We're both adults. We can be civil for his sake." "Civil." Her voice rose slightly before she caught herself glancing at the children. "You sent a lawyer after our parents. Mom cried for weeks." "I sent a lawyer because they wouldn't stop harassing me after I clearly asked for space," I corrected her. "But this isn't the time or place for this conversation." My mother returned, then effectively ending our exchange, though the tension remained thick in the air. The hours crawled by. Around noon, I offered to go to the cafeteria to get lunch for everyone. Noah, to my surprise, asked to come with me. As we walked through the hospital corridors, his small hand in mine, he looked up at me curiously. "Are you really my aunt?" he asked. The innocent question caught me off guard. "Yes, I am. I'm your mom's sister." "How come you never visit? Don't you like us?" I stopped walking, kneeling down to his level. "Noah, I like you and Lily very much. Grown-ups sometimes have complicated relationships, but it has nothing to do with you or your sister." He seemed to consider this. "Mom says you're mad because you weren't on our family tree." I smiled sadly. That was part of it, but there's a lot more to the story. Things that happened over many years. "Oh, can I be on your family tree?" he asked, the logic of a 7-year-old cutting straight to the heart. "You've always been on my family tree," I told him honestly, "even when I wasn't on yours." When we returned with sandwiches and drinks, I found my mother in conversation with a hospital administrator, papers spread across her lap. What's going on? I asked, distributing the food. My mother looked flustered. Just some insurance forms for the surgery. But something in her expression made me suspicious. After lunch, while Amanda took the children to the hospital gift shop, I approached my mother again. Is there something wrong with Dad's insurance? I asked directly. She hesitated, then her shoulders slumped in defeat. The insurance is only covering 60% of the procedure. There's a $20,000 gap we need to pay up front. And that's a problem, I pressed, knowing my father had always been financially stable. Tears welled in her eyes. We don't have it. We don't have the money. Confused, I asked to see the insurance documents. As I reviewed them, I discovered something troubling. My father had withdrawn significant sums from his retirement account over the past 2 years, incurring heavy penalties in the process. What happened to Dad's retirement funds? I asked. He had over $1 million saved last I knew. My mother looked away, shame evident in her posture. Amanda needed help after the divorce. Ryan wasn't paying child support consistently, but she wanted to keep the children in private school, keep the house in the good neighborhood. The pieces began falling into place. So Dad drained his retirement to support Amanda and the kids. And there were some investments that didn't pan out, she admitted quietly. Your father was trying to recoup the losses. He started taking risks. I sat back processing this information. Does Amanda know about this? No, my mother whispered. We didn't want her to worry. She's been through so much with the divorce. I felt a surge of anger that I quickly tamped down. This wasn't the time. I'll cover the hospital costs, I said finally. But we need to have a serious conversation about finances once Dad is stable. Relief washed over my mother's face. Thank you, Chelsea. We'll pay you back, I promise. This isn't about the money, I told her firmly. It's about the pattern. You and Dad have always sacrificed everything for Amanda without considering the consequences. It has to stop. When Amanda returned with the children, I suggested taking them to the hospital courtyard for some fresh air, giving me a chance to speak with her alone. Mom told me about the financial situation. I said once the kids were playing safely within view but out of earshot. Amanda's expression hardened. So that's why you're really here to gloat about how successful you are while we're struggling? No, I replied evenly. I'm here because I care about Dad despite everything. But I think it's time for some honesty between us. What's that supposed to mean? It means that Mom and Dad have bankrupted themselves trying to maintain your lifestyle after the divorce. Dad has been gambling to try to recoup the losses. They're broke, Amanda, and they've been hiding it from you. Her face flushed with anger. That's not true. You're making this up to hurt me. I wish I were, I said, pulling out the financial documents I had copied. Look for yourself. She snatched the papers, her eyes scanning the figures. I watched as the anger in her expression gave way to shock, then dismay. I didn't know, she said finally, her voice small. They never said anything. Because they never say no to you, I pointed out. They never have. That's not fair. They love me. Yes, they do. But love shouldn't be destructive. They've enabled you at their own expense and at mine. At yours, she scoffed, defensive again. How have they hurt you by loving me? That was when I finally lost my composure. Years of pent-up hurt and anger boiled over in the hospital cafeteria. They erased me, Amanda. Not just from a family tree, but from their lives. Every achievement, every milestone, every struggle I ever had was insignificant compared to your smallest need. I was valedictorian and they missed my speech because you had a cold. I graduated with honors and all they could talk about was your pregnancy. I built a career saving children's lives and they couldn't tell you a single thing about what I do. Amanda stared at me, seemingly stunned by my outburst. I'm not blaming you for their choices, I continued more quietly, but I am asking you to see the reality of the situation. They're drowning financially and emotionally, and if you really care about them, you'll help them set boundaries instead of taking advantage of their inability to say no to you. I never asked them to drain their retirement, she protested weakly. Maybe not explicitly, but you knew they would do anything to maintain the illusion that your life was perfect even after the divorce. You knew they would never let their golden child struggle even at the cost of their own security. We sat in tense silence for several minutes, the weight of truth heavy between us. "I always thought you were the favorite," Amanda said, finally surprising me. "You were so perfect. Straight A's, awards, scholarships. I could never measure up intellectually." I looked at her in disbelief. "Are you serious? They worshipped the ground you walked on. Everything was Amanda, Amanda, Amanda. Because they were trying to boost my confidence. They knew you didn't need the encouragement. You were always so sure of yourself, so independent." I shook my head, amazed at how differently we had experienced the same childhood. "I wasn't independent by choice, Amanda. I learned to be self-sufficient because I had to be." Before she could respond, my phone rang. It was the hospital. My father was out of surgery. As we hurried back to the cardiac unit, I realized that this was the first real conversation Amanda and I had ever had as adults. It hadn't solved anything, but at least the truth was finally out in the open. My father's surgeon met us in the waiting room. "The procedure went well," he reported. "We were able to bypass all 4 blockages. He's in recovery now and should be waking up soon." The relief in the room was palpable. My mother broke down in tears and Amanda hugged her children close. I stood slightly apart, processing my own complex emotions. Later that evening, as I sat alone at my father's bedside while he slept, I noticed a worn leather bag among his personal belongings. Something compelled me to open it, and inside I found a surprise that shook me to my core. It was a photo album, small and clearly well handled. As I turned the pages, I realized it was filled with me. Newspaper clippings of my debate team victories. A program from my piano recital with my name highlighted. My college acceptance letter. A printout of the hospital website featuring my community outreach program. Even recent articles I had published in medical journals. In the back of the album was a card I had made for him when I was 6 years old. "World's best dad," it proclaimed in wobbly, childish handwriting. I was still holding the album when he woke up. "You found it," he said weakly, his eyes clearing as they focused on me. "Why do you have this?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. He tried to shift in the bed, wincing with the effort. "I've always been proud of you, Chelsea. I just never knew how to show it." "Why not?" He was quiet for so long I thought he might have fallen back asleep. Finally he spoke. "Your mother and I, we always knew you would be fine. You were so smart, so capable from the beginning. Amanda needed more from us, or we thought she did. So you ignored me because I was competent." The irony was almost too much. "We didn't ignore you," he protested weakly. "We just focused more on Amanda. It wasn't right, I see that now. But I want you to know I kept track of everything you did, every accomplishment." I looked down at the album in my hands. "In secret, where no one could see." "I was wrong," he said simply. "We were wrong, and by the time I realized how badly we had hurt you, you were gone." I didn't know what to say. The validation I had craved for decades had apparently existed all along, hidden in a bag, where it did me no good, where it couldn't counteract the daily message that I didn't matter as much. "I can't fix the past," my father continued, "but I'd like a chance to do better if you'll let me." I closed the album gently. "I don't know if that's possible," I said honestly. "But I'm here now. Let's focus on getting you well. We can talk about the rest later." He nodded, understanding the boundaries I was setting. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was an opening a possibility I hadn't allowed before. As I left his room that night, I felt something shift inside me. The revelation of the secret album hadn't healed the wounds of my childhood, but it had complicated the narrative I had built. My parents' failure wasn't one of not caring, but of not showing it when it mattered. It didn't excuse their behavior, but it did make them more human, more flawed, and less monstrous. I didn't know if reconciliation was possible or even desirable, but I did know that I could move forward now with more clarity about what had really happened in our family. And sometimes understanding is the first step toward healing. 1 month later, I stood at the entrance to my parents' home, a sense of déjà vu washing over me. The last time I had been here was the day of the family tree, the day everything had finally broken. Now I was returning under very different circumstances. My father had been discharged from the hospital 2 weeks prior. His recovery was progressing well, though he would need cardiac rehabilitation for several months. After much discussion with Michael and my therapist, I had decided to maintain limited contact with my family but with clear boundaries in place. You don't owe them forgiveness, Dr. Winters had reminded me during our session, but forgiveness is sometimes more for yourself than for the other person. Michael squeezed my hand supportively as we approached the front door. This was his first time meeting my parents properly, though he had briefly encountered them at the hospital. My mother answered the door, nervous energy evident in her overly bright smile and fidgeting hands. "Chelsea, Michael, welcome. Please come in." The house looked different somehow. It took me a moment to realize that most of the formal furniture had been replaced with simpler, more comfortable pieces. The pretentiousness that had always characterized my parents' home was noticeably diminished. My father sat in a recliner in the living room, a blanket over his legs despite the warm day. He looked older, frailer, but his eyes brightened when he saw me. "Chelsea," he said warmly, "and this must be Michael. It's good to finally meet you properly, son." Michael stepped forward, shaking my father's hand carefully. "Likewise, sir. I'm glad to see you recovering well." The initial awkwardness gradually eased as we sat down for lunch. Amanda had declined to join us, which was probably for the best given our unresolved tensions. She was, my mother informed me, looking for a job for the first time since her marriage, a small but significant step toward independence. "We've been seeing a financial advisor," my father told me as we ate, "and a family therapist. Both were long overdue." My mother nodded in agreement. "We've had to face some difficult truths about ourselves and our parenting. It hasn't been easy." "But it's been necessary," my father added. "I never want to be the kind of father who makes his child feel invisible again." I appreciated their efforts, but I remained cautious. "I'm glad to hear that. I hope it helps, especially with Amanda and the children." "We'd like it to help with you too," my mother said carefully. "If you're willing." The therapist suggested family sessions maybe once a month via video since you're in Boston. I glanced at Michael, who gave me an encouraging nod. "I'll think about it," I said. "I'm not ready to jump back into regular family gatherings, but I could try a therapy session." The relief on their faces was evident. We weren't magically healed, not by a long shot. But we were talking, really talking, for perhaps the first time in our lives. As we prepared to leave, my mother handed me an envelope. "From Lily," she explained. "She made it for you." In the car heading back to Boston, I opened the envelope to find a handmade card. On the front was a drawing of a woman with my red hair helping a child stand with leg braces. Inside was written, "My Hero Project" by Lily Williams. My hero is my Aunt Chelsea. She helps kids who can't walk learn to stand up and be strong, just like she stood up for herself. Tears pricked my eyes as I showed the card to Michael. "Out of the mouths of babes," he said softly. Over the following months, I kept my word and participated in family therapy sessions via video conference. They were often difficult, sometimes painful, as we excavated decades of harmful patterns and misunderstandings. But they were also illuminating. For the first time, I began to see my parents as complex humans rather than the one-dimensional figures who had hurt me. I learned about my father's own upbringing with a domineering father who had never shown affection. I came to understand my mother's desperate need to create a perfect family image to compensate for her chaotic childhood. None of it excused their behavior, but it helped me contextualize it. Amanda and I had our own session, just the two of us, facilitated by the therapist. It was tense and tearful, but by the end we had reached a fragile understanding. We would probably never be close, but we could be civil, even occasionally warm, especially for the sake of her children. "I was jealous of you," she admitted during our session. "You got away. You built your own life without needing anyone's approval. I never had that courage. And I was jealous of you," I confessed. for being loved so openly and completely, even when you didn't earn it. 6 months after my father's heart attack, Michael and I got married in the small Vermont ceremony we had planned. To my surprise, I found myself adding my family to the guest list, a small but significant sign of the progress we had made. The weekend of the wedding, my parents arrived at our hotel with a gift wrapped in simple brown paper. "We wanted to give this to you privately," my mother explained, "before the ceremony tomorrow." Inside the package was a family tree. Not Lily's school project, but a new one professionally done with my branch prominently displayed. My name, my photo, my connection to them undeniable and permanent. "We can't change the past," my father said, his voice thick with emotion. "But we want you to know that you have always been part of this family, even when we failed to show it." I ran my fingers over my name on the tree, then over the blank spaces beneath it, spaces for my future children should Michael and I choose to have them. "Thank you," I said simply, accepting the gesture for what it was, an acknowledgement rather than an eraser of the past. The wedding was beautiful, intimate, exactly as we had planned. My father, still moving slowly but determined, walked me down the aisle. My mother sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face. Amanda came alone, having arranged for a sitter for the children, a small gesture that showed she understood this day was about me, not her. After the ceremony, as we all gathered for dinner in the inn's private dining room, I looked around at the eclectic group we had assembled. My Boston friends mingling with my Philadelphia family. My worlds colliding, but not catastrophically. "Are you happy?" Michael asked, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. "Yes," I said, realizing it was true. Not because everything is perfect, or because all the hurt is gone, but because I'm finally living authentically. I'm not trying to earn love anymore. 3 months after our wedding, I discovered I was pregnant. Michael and I were overjoyed, if a little terrified, at the prospect of becoming parents. We decided to wait until the end of the first trimester to share the news with anyone. When that milestone arrived, I called Michael first, of course, sharing the ultrasound image over a celebratory dinner at our favorite restaurant. Then I called Zara and James, who immediately began arguing over who would be the better godparent. Only after those calls did I reach out to my parents. Not because they were less important, but because I was establishing a new pattern, one where my chosen family came first, where my parents were part of my life, but did not define it. They were thrilled, as I knew they would be. My mother immediately began talking about nursery themes and baby showers. But I noticed something different this time. When I gently set boundaries, when I explained that we wanted a small, intimate shower with just close friends and family, she actually listened. She didn't push or guilt trip or manipulate. She simply said, "Whatever makes you happy, Chelsea. This is your baby and your life." Small steps, small victories. Not a complete transformation, but growth. As I hung a modified version of the family tree in what would become our nursery, I thought about cycles and how they can be broken. I thought about the child growing inside me, who would never know what it felt like to be erased, to be invisible in their own family. Sometimes the people who should love you the most have to lose you completely before they see your true worth. I told my unborn child, as I smoothed my hand over my still flat stomach. "But I promise you will never have to disappear to be seen. You will always have a place on our family tree exactly as you are." I stood back and looked at the tree on the wall, the branches extending upward, ready for new growth, new possibilities. My parents hadn't given me the childhood I deserved, but they had given me this chance to do better, to learn from their mistakes. And perhaps that was a gift in its own complicated way. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Remember that your worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories of healing and self-discovery. And don't forget to share with someone who might need to hear that they deserve to be seen. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the family we create is more important than the one we're born into.